Welcome to another late night with me, Patrick Moore. Our first tale tonight is called Peepshow and it's written by Nick Walker. Part 2. It was Wednesday and the billboard read, "Today, size splitter. Mr. Edison filled the booth with gags, may offend." A woman was feeling low. Her train was delayed. It might have crashed. She hoped not. Her boyfriend was on it. Although he was a pagan, so perhaps it wouldn't be a bad thing. She entered the booth and paid £2. The hatch opened. Miss Edison was still chained up. He looked pale and tired. Mrs. Edison worked the padlock with a hairpin. She looked pale and tired too. She had cuts on her hands where the hairpin had slipped. "Is this the right day?" asked the customer. "Yes," said Miss Edison. "This is still the size splitter day, although there'll hopefully be an escape as well. If I do an escape as well, then I'll ask you to put another £1 in the slot." "I haven't got another £1," said the woman. "Then piss off," said Mr. Edison. Mrs. Edison stabbed him in the hand with a hairpin and apologized to the customer for being told to piss off. It had been a long night. She asked the customer if she knew how to break padlocks, but the customer didn't. And when was the show going to start? Mrs. Edison put some burlesque music on the record player. It gave the booth a Max Miller feel. She turned the writing to Showbiz Orange. "Introducing Mr. Edison," she said. "Hold on to your sides." Mr. Edison was of the opinion that the show must go on. Despite his chains, and despite his badly bleeding hand, he struggled to his feet. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I won't say my wife is fat, but when I look at her, I'm sick all over the floor. Buckets of it. It simply pours out of me." He waited for a laugh. "But your wife isn't fat," said the customer. Mrs. Edison smiled at her and said, "Thank you." Mr. Edison warned the customer not to heckle. If she heckled, then he had a selection of withering put-downs, developed during a decade of playing tougher venues than this booth. The customer kept quiet. Mr. Edison continued. "A funny thing happened to me on the way to the booth. I saw a beautiful woman on the street, and I thought to myself, she looks good in a pair of heels. I wish I had married her. I bet she doesn't go around swallowing keys and kissing oily men right in front of me. Right in front of my damn face, if I damn well wasn't there, if I didn't exist." Mr. Edison waited for the customer to laugh. She didn't. "Here's one," he said. "A man walked into a pub covered in chains and says to the barman, 'A pint, please.' And the barman says, 'Why are you covered in chains?' The man replies, 'I've got an incredibly stupid wife.' 'Really?' said the barman. 'Yes,' said the man. 'Look at her. My God, why did I marry her? What the hell have I done with my life?' Mr. Edison waited for the customer to laugh. 'These aren't jokes,' said the customer. Mr. Edison said they were true stories. 'They aren't proper jokes,' said the customer. Mr. Edison's blood boiled. He launched himself at the hatch, his face slanting into the opening, and he screamed at the customer. He called her a shrill, mad tart. He told her she was well advised to get a train out of town before she got burned as a witch. A hateful, sour witch. It wasn't that his arms were chained to his sides. He'd saved the town from the bother of burning her by doing it right there and then in his booth. He'd invite people to come and watch for the reduced price of £1.50. His eyes were wild and bloodshot, and spit shouted the customer. She covered her face and started weeping. Mrs. Edison cut out the music and the showbiz light and dragged Mr. Edison away. She pushed him to the floor and stood on his chest. She apologized to the customer for the distress caused and refunded her £2. Mr. Edison wailed of the loss of £2, but Mr. Edison told him not to complain, as they still had £8 profit left from the previous customer. And if all right with him, she'd like to spend it on milk and magnesia to ease her terrible stomachache. She thought the key might be rusting inside her. Welcome to another late night with me, Patrick Moore. Our first tale tonight is called Peepshow, and it's written by Nick Walker. Part 3. It was Thursday, and the billboard read, "La petite chanteuse, Mrs. Edison sings Falling in Love Again with a voice like an angel, accompanied by Mr. Edison on the pianoforte. Refunds for those leaving the booth dry-eyed." A boy and his father waited on the station platform. The boy asked his father what petite chanteuse was. The father didn't know. The father couldn't even read English, let alone French, but he hidden it from his son for nearly 10 years. The boy asked for £2 to find out. The father paid up. The boy entered the booth. He spun the seat to the top and climbed on. He put £2 in the slot, and the hatch opened. The lighting was stark. Mr. Edison's chains were now biting into his skin, giving him angry sores. His eyes were sunken, his chin unshaven. Mrs. Edison was asleep in the corner. She was surrounded by bent hairpins, broken hacksaw blades, and indigestion remedies. "Help me!" croaked Mr. Edison. "What's the matter with you?" asked the boy. "The key for my padlocks is inconveniently in my wife's stomach," said Mr. Edison. He was very much hoping she'd have had a bowel movement by now, but she seemed clogged up. She blamed it on their starchy showbiz diet. He blamed it on the key, which was probably being corroded by stomach acid, and might well be useless even if she did pass it. The boy looked through his pockets and found a handful of raisins. He dropped them to the hatch. "What the hell am I supposed to do with those?" said Mr. Edison. "You look hungry," said the boy. Mrs. Edison woke. She crawled on her hands and knees to the front of the booth and started pecking at the raisins. She told Mr. Edison that the raisins might loosen her up. Mr. Edison saw the logic and demanded the boy continue to provide raisins. But the boy didn't have any more. Instead he asked, "What's a petite chanteuse?" "I am glad you asked, Mr. Edison. Let's not forget why you're here." He shuffled his chair over to an old piano in the corner. There was an Anglo-poised lamp on top which illuminated yellow, cracked keys. He leant over the keyboard and hit the G with his nose. "There's your note," he said to his wife. Mrs. Edison got to her feet. She swayed. "Law!" sang Mrs. Edison unsteadily. She smiled at the boy. She could see his face through the slot. He had nice brown eyes, just like her son Jim. Jim drove trains. Mrs. Edison wished he'd pop into the booth occasionally, just to say hello, but he never did. He had better things to do with his time. She put her hand on the microphone stand to tell herself. Mr. Edison told her he'd accompany as best he could, but mostly had to be a cappella, due to his restricted condition. He banged away at the tune with his nose. His teeth chipped on the keys. Mrs. Edison sang along, "Falling in love again." There was a dry catch in her throat. The boy didn't like her looking so pale and pushed a chocolate toffee through the letterbox. Mrs. Edison grabbed it and stuffed it in her mouth. "What are you doing?" said Mrs. Edison. "What are you giving her?" "A chocolate," said the boy. "That's dairy," said Mrs. Edison. "You can't give a singer dairy. It clogs up the vocal cords." He decided that a petite chanteuse must be some sort of animal. Perhaps the booth was a little zoo. He didn't like zoos. They upset him. He started to leave. "Don't go," said Miss Edison. "Stay and hear the rest of the song." The boy didn't want to. "Have you got any more chocolates?" asked Mrs. Edison. The boy shook his head. "Bye," he said. Mrs. Edison thrust her hand through the hatch and grabbed the boy's arm and wouldn't let go. "Please talk to me. Please give me another chocolate." The boy struggled and cried out. His father heard the cry and burst into the booth. He bellowed at Mrs. Edison and prized her fingers free, breaking one of them. He carried the boy out of the booth, onto a train, and away. Mrs. Edison put the broken finger in her mouth and sucked it. She put it on her throat a little and was sick on the floor. Mrs. Edison rummaged through the sick, but it was just chocolate and raisin. There was still no damn key.